Welcome to the Inquirer 1.0. Today we have a video on brown bread Fred Foreman and the disappearance and murder of Thomas Ginger Marks. I shall give you the background, what happened, and then at the end I'll give you my thoughts. With that being said, let's continue. Freddie Foreman, sometimes referred to as brown bread Fred due to the bodies he was accused of killing, is a legendary figure in the underworld. His infamy stemmed from his years associated with the Cray brothers and a 10-year sentence for his role in assisting with the disposing of Jack the Hat McVitie, killed by the Crays. He also admitted to murdering the powerhouse Frank the Axeman Mitchell, but later retracted when the double jeopardy laws changed in 2003. A less-known bloody vendetta he was involved in for a decade started through a callous attack on his brother. His brother George was involved in an affair with the partner of a serious villain and safe blower, Jimmy Evans, who is renowned for his love of firearms and the propensity to use them when crossed. He was given the nod that his wife had took up with Fred's brother and went out looking for her and him to exact revenge. He called on the help of his friend Ginger Marks, a car dealer and towering hardman with ginger hair and glasses, who himself had issues with Freddie Foreman. They tooled up and went to George Foreman's front door. When George answered, Evans pulled out a double-barrel shotty and blasted him in the groin. The injuries suffered were horrendous, wiping out his manhood in one swoop and leaving him in critical condition, fighting for his life. Thomas Ginger Marks, who had accompanied his friend Evans on the attack, far from feeling guilty, went to a party with a shotgun on his lap, bragging about how they had done Foreman and that they would do the rest of them if they wanted it. Freddie Foreman, George's brother, was incandescent with rage when finding out his brother had been seriously injured in the most depraved type of act of violence. He knew about his brother's affair, but felt it was fair game as the woman had opened up about the violence she had suffered in the relationship. And according to Foreman, Evans was well known for his brutality towards women. The fact that not only had they shot his brother, but were openly bragging about it, set Freddie Foreman on a bloody mission of revenge. He would avenge his brother and set a precedent that no one messed with Foreman or his family. Evans quickly realised that he may have made a mistake acting so irrationally over the affair, as he got word Freddie Foreman had pulled together his firm, made up with the likes of Alfie Gerrard, an ultra-dangerous villain who were hunting for him all across London. He made the decision to speak to the Crays, who he was friendly with, but when they heard the Foreman name, they told him they were not interested in getting involved. It's important to note that although Freddie Foreman operated out of South London, he was also well respected in East London and crossed the divide, owning several bars in both areas. Freddie Foreman had one of the most respected firms in the country in those times, with the likes of Alfie Gerrard, the Olives, Ronnie, Joey and Danny, Jimmy Turner, Ronnie Everett, Jerry Callahan, and a host of other heavies to call on when required. Foreman struck lucky in his quest for revenge when he was given intel that Ginger Marks and Jimmy Evans had planned a robbery and was given the date and location of when it was going to go down. Fred knew Marks' address in Stepney, East London, and plotted up with Alfie Gerrard and another loyal friend, biding their time until Ginger Marks showed his face and hooked up with his partner in crime, Jimmy Evans. Freddie Foreman highlights what happened in his book, Freddie Foreman, The Godfather of Crime. Alf started the motor and slowly drew out. My right hand closed on the .38 revolver, and I wound down the passenger window with my left. Alf gently eased the car forward and drew alongside the pair as they walked past the school playground and joined the pub. I leaned out, my gun at the ready. Ginger! Mark stopped in his tracks, unsure of who we were, but was then startled by the recognition. He stepped towards us. I let fly a hail of bullets. There was no sound from Marks, but Evans reacted instantly. He crouched behind Ginger and gripped his shoulders, using him as a shield. The pair of them danced like puppets on a string, jumping and twisting about in the street, trying to avoid the volley of bullets. Ginger took most of the bullets, although one entered Evans' coat, missing him by a hair's breadth. Evans could no longer support his shield. He let go of Mark's shoulders. The man dropped to the pavement as Evans ran away. I dived out of the car and stood over Marks with my gun pointing to his head. He didn't move. Marks was still lying on the ground. We picked him up, slung him into the back of the car, and tore off in the direction of Valence Road. Ginger Marks was never found. There are, however, two conflicting stories of how the hit went down. Jimmy Evans, who later wrote a book, disputes the claims he held his friend in front of him as they were shot. Evans, in his memoirs, rubbishes the Foreman version of events and actually gives very reasonable and logical arguments over the shooting. Evans states that Marks was called over to a car with 4 occupants. 2 opened fire, killing Marks. Shots were then fired towards him, but he escaped. The story goes that Marks misheard the call and thought it was him that he had beckoned. Foreman claims this, and that Evans hid behind Marks and used his body as a shield. Evans was then supposed to have hidden under a vehicle. Evans completely rubbishes this by stating that Foreman and Gerard opened fire from 6 feet away, and not in a position to mistake Marks for him, even in the dark. Marks was 6'4" and around 15 stone, while he, Jimmy Evans, was 5'8" and 11 stone. Evans says that the reason Marks was targeted was that he had been told by Duke Osborne that Foreman was in cahoots with Butler and Williams, the heads of the flying squad. Marks told Evans what Osborne had said to him and was telling anybody who would listen. Evans' argument over the shooting was that Marks became the immediate target for Foreman, despite the war between them, and that they could easily have killed them both. Despite the change to the double jeopardy law, a change to an 800-year-old law, Foreman has never been charged, not even for perjury, for Marks or Frank Mitchell, despite admitting that the evidence of Albert Donahue was the truth. Evans claims that Foreman has had high-level protection, including for murder. In February 1965, Evans himself was charged for the shooting of George Foreman, who was left severely wounded from the attack. George Foreman, being staunch, obeyed the Underworld Code and refused to be a witness against Evans. Evans was found not guilty of the attack on George Foreman. In 1974, while serving a sentence for manslaughter for the killing of a young man who had threatened his common-law wife from France, Annick Webb, she had stalled in front of their car and enraged them. Evans, who had been driving in front of both of the cars involved in the road rage incident, jumped out, confronting the men, attacking them immediately, stabbing a 21-year-old William Fernie, who died instantly in his girlfriend's arms. Evans got 7 years in jail, but broke his silence over the Marks killing in 1974 when receiving a Dear John letter from Annick Webb, his common-law wife. She claimed she could not wait the 7 years he was going to be incarcerated for, so he was desperate to get out sooner. He named Alf Gerrard, Jerry Callahan, Ronnie Everett and Fred Foreman as the men involved in the murder of his friend, Thomas Ginger Marks. After a dramatic court case, all 4 were acquitted by the jury and walked away free men. Foreman goes on to say in his book, "I make no apologies for my own role in the affair. Alfie and I were not innocent. We followed Underworld Code, which in its own way is strict, if not stricter than the statutory laws governing the general public." On Jimmy Evans, Foreman says, "This is a person who wants and asks for respect with his own kind. No way. He'll have to live with what he has done for the rest of his own life. He's even going to grasp me from the grave. He has left statements with his solicitor fellows in the event of his death, stating that I would be responsible for it. He didn't mind going around shooting people, but when things got a bit rough, he just couldn't be a man and face the consequences." Okay, guys, so my view on this is that I don't think that Freddie Foreman was a grass or anything like that. He was as staunch as they come, as was his brother. Did he have bent flying squad in his pocket? Quite possibly. Do I believe the account of Evans or Foreman in regards to the shooting? It doesn't really matter now. But what we should remember is that Thomas Ginger Marks, although he did accompany Evans to the shooting of George Evans in a dreadful way. I mean, to be shot and have you survived, but have your manhood wiped out, etc., just horrendous. He didn't actually pull the trigger. He may have mouthed off. There might have been certain things going on. So is it plausible that Fred wanted him out the way as well for the allegations that he was putting around, whether they were true or not? As I say, I don't think they were true. He may have had tame people in his pocket. But I mean, the point is, there seems to be no feeling of remorse for him slaying Thomas Ginger Marks, although he didn't actually get the person who was guilty of the crime against his brother. So yeah, I think that our thoughts have got to go out to any surviving relatives of Thomas Ginger Marks, and for himself, whose body was never retrieved. So there was no way the family could bury him in a dignified way. So sad circumstances all around. But I've managed to locate and purchase the book, which is not available on Kindle or anything. It's only in paperback format. I think I got the last one potentially of the memoirs of Jimmy Evans. So I might bring a second part with more sort of thoughts and reaction from his memoirs as well to sort of balance it out. All right, guys.